Hello, this is the Torg Eternity Delphi Council Debriefings, where the storm has a name. We are your hosts, Leamon, Jay, and Mark, and today we will be delving into the Pan-Pacifica Cosm cards, which have a little twist from the other Cosm cards that we'll get into before we do the first five. But before we do that, I do want to encourage anybody to email us at torgdcd@gmail.com. You can send in your questions. We'll hopefully have answers. And if you send in comments, we'll comment back, have discussions, etc. So again, that was torgdcd@gmail.com. But before we get into this week's episode of Pan-Pacifica cards, I did want to go over one of the comments in the YouTube last episode that we put out, which is from Lynn Green 7978, which just says, because we were talking about Tharcold and stuff, it says, speaking of Tharcold and ranges, I noticed that the thralls wear collars that explode if they go too far from their dominant, but frequently they are attacking with no dominant around. Rules as written, they start the encounter dead. And then there was some replies and such like that. So basically, I just wanted, and Jay replied, I should say that, he had a couple of scenarios. The thing is, in Tharcold, there is a dominance chain. So there's, no matter what, there will be somebody above you. And it is like a ladder rungs that you can go up and down the ladder, and you can fight or intimidate your way up, or lose fights and get intimidated on your way down. So in any type of Tharcold adventure, the thralls, the Tharcold etc., will have a pecking order. So even if it's a bunch of minions, one of those minions would be dominant over the other one down the pecking order, and be a little more trusted, or a little more something that they would have that control over the collar, so that especially if the Tharcold is killed, the other ones don't just explode, because then they would go to the next person up on the dominant chain, or one of them would become dominant. So that's how the Tharcold would work. Jay, or did you have any more to say on that?
Well, I did. I gave two possibilities that I kind of have used in the past on YouTube. But one is, like you said, someone would be in charge. I would personally imagine that the Tharkoldu would determine which one is like the corporal or whatever in charge of the squad of thralls, and makes it so everyone else's slave color kind of tethers to that one, and that's the one it's going off of, because otherwise 25 meters not really that far for these guys. Like they have to go to the bathroom or something, there's no privacy. So just one of the thralls, and that way also the players can't just immediately tell which one it is too. The second option would be that there's probably like a roaming mode that can be activated. If the Tharkoldu doesn't want to be on top of it, they can just set them to roam, and then either on a timer or have them on a recall. It's like you have to get back within this certain amount of time, or you've failed your mission and thus your heads blow up, that sort of thing. Those were my two thoughts for things that could explain why you encounter thralls that should have already blown up. Rules as written.
Mark, did you have any thoughts on the thralls with their collars exploding?
I've kind of always used the roaming method because it just makes sense. I mean, you're talking about a Coltech, so you have a high-tech collar here. It's not just a little wad of C4 attached to a chain that's chained to your neck kind of thing, with a little detonator and a radio beacon. So there's got to be a certain amount of technology involved there where the Tharkoldu can designate, because there's no point to, if all of your thralls blow up when they get 25 meters away from you, then how do you take over anybody? How do you send them on missions? How do you have them do anything and be useful? They're just piles of thralls all around you, hugging onto you, because if they get too far away, the ones on the edge, somebody
thinking
kidding
of an
around shoves
alpha
Bob too far.
An alpha being like a bee swarm, where
Yeah.
it's like just all clumped together, trying to maintain that.
And you're on the edge, and this guy's pissing you off, so you shove him into 26 meters, and all of a sudden he goes off, and you're like, okay, well, I don't have to worry about Larry anymore. But I see the 25-meter rule, if you will, more as a limit of, okay, the thralls know they are outside of their safe zone. Things could go badly for them at any moment based on what's going on. Whatever, it's your Cosm, so how do you want to deal with it? I would think that you just make up whatever makes sense to you and how you run your game, and implement that rule, if you will, how your Cosm operates with that, because it, as you pointed out correctly, it's kind of a fast and loose rules as written. So I don't think they just 26 meters, boom, they're done, because it doesn't make any sense. So run with it.
I want to say I introduced that dominance chain concept that I was talking about. It was either in the Blood on the Blasted Lands or in the Wastelander's Guide to the Blasted Land, or to Tharkle. Changed a couple times during creation. So the Wastelander's Guide or the Blood on the Blasted Lands has that dominance chain type thing. There's the pecking order. So yes, thank you. We normally just do the emails. Every once in a while I'll bring in something from a forum, and Lynn Green 7978 has responded to many of our episodes, if not all of them, so I did want to acknowledge you there and thank you for watching. So let's move on to the Cosm cards. The Pan-Pacifica Cosm cards, there's actually 25 instead of the normal 20 if you count the booster pack that came, because some of the world laws changed between, or one of the world laws changed between the core rules printing and the Pan-Pacifica source book. And the other thing was, during the Pan-Pacifica wave, there was an adventure that kind of where there was a vaccination or a cure found for the contagion. So the infected cards were quote-unquote removed, as well as the Law of Vengeance cards, and they were replaced with other things. The Law of Vengeance itself was replaced with the Law of Rationality, so that will explain why a couple of these cards happened. And while, and I think we've probably mentioned it here before, while there are still pockets and areas of infected and Jiangji and all the different mutations from it, it's one of those where I would say don't throw away your old cards, because there might be areas that you want to bring those cards in. And as we said with all of these, we highly recommend you tailor the cards to your adventure, so stuff that doesn't make sense doesn't show up, and things that maybe don't make sense in Pan-Pacifica in one area would absolutely make sense in another area, like the infected cards in Taiwan would make sense where they might not make sense, in Shanghai or something like that. So let's go to the first number one with the Law of Vengeance. Vengeance is mine. Play on a reality-rated foe. He may not soak wounds caused by your character for the next 3 rounds. So, Jay, what are your thoughts of Vengeance is mine?
I have no inner knowledge of what led to the changes for the world laws, but I almost like to think it was purely due to this OP card that the Law of Vengeance got removed, because this card is ridiculous. Now, I guess if you're not a combat character, it's not going to be the biggest deal, because it's only wounds that you cause, not everybody. But still, not being able to soak is almost just instant death for a big boss enemy. If the other players can get them very vulnerable and you can get buffed, and you are a combatant, it's good night. So this is an extremely potent card, and I don't really know if it's that flavorful, to be honest, because it's not like you're actually getting revenge on anything. Like, there's nothing that happens to you first to trigger it or anything like that. It's just, hey, make it hard for this guy to soak. So very, very, very powerful. I guess if you're a player, you would love to see this. Too bad that officially it's gone after a certain amount of time. But like Leamon said, you can always use whatever makes sense. With the Law of Acquisition, Reiko could even bring the Law of Vengeance back in one zone if she wanted to. Like maybe if there was a mixed Ororsh Pan-Pacifica zone, it's like, there's a lot of horrors in here and nightmares that maybe it'd be good if we could take them out. Something like that.
Mark, your thoughts on Vengeance is Mine?
Yeah, from the game master's chair, I hate this card. I cannot tell you how many times this card's been dropped on a boss fight, and boom, now my threat can't soak, and boom, 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 here we go, and 1-2 rounds later, the what should be the big dramatic end fight turns into 2 rounds, and okay, guys, we're all done. Nobody took a scratch. What are we going to do now? And you're just like, I hate this card. So, but from the other side of the screen, from the player side, this card's fantastic because I drop this on the big boss, and then I let my heavy hitters roll in, and we might not even have to fight more than a round or two, depending on how good things go and how much how much resources we have. So. I can completely understand why this card might have gotten yanked. I from a game master's perspective, I would like to see it reworked a little bit, changed somewhat so that it doesn't, maybe make it a contest against a reality rated foe, or something along those lines. I don't know, something, because it's just it takes what ought to be an interesting, dramatic act-ending fight and turns it into a hand wave and I'm opposed to that.
So yeah, I want to say it's a little deceptive. The next 3 rounds, you almost think, oh well, at least it's not the fight or the scene, but 3 rounds is all you need normally.
Yeah.
So it's gonna happen within those 3 rounds. A lot of the other cards that tend to have a little more balanced would require you to maybe take a unsoakable wound yourself first, and then you could play this, or this could be a 1 round for your character. The only thing is if you have a reality rated foe with a really high toughness that's only taking shocks, it doesn't say that they can't soak shock, so they could use those possibilities to keep themselves up by soaking shock. But yeah, otherwise very, very powerful card, and yeah, it's just very, very powerful with 0 negatives. Even if you're not the melee person, hey, you got three rounds to try to do some wounds that can't be soaked. So you do one small wound every round.
And you don't have to play this on the first round of combat either. You can wait for the other characters to maybe do some wounds, and if he's on 1 wound with some possibilities, then you play this.
Right.
On your, once your attack hits, it's like, oh well. Now, whether that's kind of cheesy or not is up to you, but
I
don't think you have to play it at the
beginning.
Yeah, I don't think you have to play it at the beginning of combat. I would probably like to see people play it before they make their attack, mind you, but just depends on your table.
It clearly doesn't say when to
it doesn't
play it. So cheese or not cheese, play it when you want to. It's not an interrupt or anything. It's like, all of the guys on the stream, I know exactly how it would get played. I would get warmed up. They would do 5 or 6 wounds, and I would go, okay, well, let me go. I'm gonna soak that. I don't want to take that. And no, you're not. Boom, drop that on the table as I get ready to soak. Just like how they do opponent fails, which is tons of fun. Yeah.
That's why I gotta say, I'm soaking. I soaked too late. Okay.
That's I see what you did there, Jay, and I'm queuing that up because I got some people.
Don't blame that on me though. If you try
I'm absolutely going to give you credit for that. I'm not blaming you. I'm
They
giving
won't
you
like
credit. That's fantastic. I'm using
don't
it.
do this at home.
Okay, so moving on to the second number one, which the law of vengeance again was replaced by the law of rationality, which is called tech supremacy. Play when drawn. This act, any character who fails or gets a standard success when attempting to cast spells, invoke miracles, or manifest psionic powers takes backlash, which is 2 shock. Draw another card if no Storm Knight has these abilities. So, Jay, what are your thoughts on tech supremacy?
Well, it is good that it has that redraw aspect. Unlike some other ones, you don't get anything for this. There's no possibilities or anything. But on the other hand, it's not the worst. It's just the 2 shock. I always think it's weird that psionics is included, but I know it's not part of the tech axiom. The real question is it specifically mentions when you fail. So is this 2 shock in addition to the normal 2 shock that you would normally get for that happening anyways? I didn't think so, but then the way it's worded is kind of like, why would they even mention the fails? Or that I just figure it meant that standard counts as a fail as far as backlash is concerned.
That's how I took it.
Game Masters, you get to decide again.
Yeah,
Table variation.
But like to me, why even have the whole this act any character who fails? It should be this act
right.
A character who gets a standard success when attempting also, takes backlash.
That's why it was
I
weird.
personally would have the failure be 2 extra shock and a success be 2 shock.
Yeah.
But you don't get
then.
anything for it. Mm-hmm. You don't even get anything for it. You're just
well,
boned with this one.
Keep in mind, it's any character, not any player character.
And
no, I get it.
An entire act. So.
Yep.
So if there's enemy psionics,
everybody
could be an issue.
Mm-hmm. So yes, the main thing is Game Masters, you and your table decide what the failure, if that actually means additional shock, or if it's just the standard success gets the backlash as well. But otherwise, yeah, it lasts the whole... I think the thing I like, even though the 2 shock, or even the 4 shock's a little more, but even with just 2 shock, that's every single standard success is going to still do it, and it lasts the entire time. It's not like to the first character. So hopefully as a game master, you'll see this happen often.
You probably will, because there's 2 of them.
Yeah.
I like that, though. I like the fact that it's the entire act. I like there's a lot about this card to like, and the fact that it takes a fail and moves it into standard, and standard becomes a fail. And I think Leamon's interpretation is right. Whether it's right or wrong, I like the way that you've interpreted it, where a fail is 4 shock, the standard success is 2 shock, and this is in effect for the entire act. Oh, and you have to play it right away. And as we've pointed out numerous times, if no one has any of these abilities, go draw another card, which makes it right. But the best thing about this card, I think, is that it gets everybody. It gets spells, it gets miracles, it gets psionics. It's not just one class of special abilities. It's all the folks running around with it. So it's a catch-all that makes life harder for the players.
Yep. So I would agree. And the only other thing is the law of rationality in lore was brought in specifically against those Orosh in those Orosh mix zones of hey, we need to, Orosh has a lot of miracle stuff, and they have a lot of magic stuff, and even the encroachment of Tharkold on Pan-Pacifica type thing, they're have psionics, so and Pan-Pacifica,
the vampires do,
yeah, and even in Pan-Pacifica having psionics, the corporations don't like it. It's was brought up.
Yeah,
that's a random thing that they don't like anybody being able to get psionics, because that takes away your position in your company is what makes you neat and cool, not necessarily some special abilities that you get willy nilly. So yeah, I think
That you're not subscribing to.
one. Right? You know, we can't get a subscription.
How do we monetize this? Damn it!
And an EULA on this. So. So let's move on to 2, Bloodbath. A whirlwind of shots, blows, slashes, or other attacks causes 2 shock to every non-reality rated foe in the combat encounter. So, Jay, what are your thoughts on Bloodbath?
It kind of goes back to something I mentioned in the last one. If you're using the mobs rule or not, where you could just kind of like total it up to get rid of individual combatants. So if I just, instead of like doing 2 to each one, if there's like 6 of them, I say, okay, well, we do 12 shock to this guy, and if it goes over, then any excess goes to another guy. So we eliminate individuals. So this can be very good for that. If that's how you're running things, like a bit faster and looser. But if you're manually tracking, it can be kind of annoying. Usually enemies tend not to go down by shock, as we've discussed. And there is a distinct possibility in Pan-Pacifica of having to face Jiangxi or other Xenogospog that are undead and or robots. So there's a lot of non-shockable foes out there in Pan-Pacifica. So this is kind of like of limited usability, I find. If I'm a player and I get this, it's like, there can sometimes be a cool moment, you can wait for it and play it, but it's usually a little bit underwhelming, I find.
Mark, your thoughts on Bloodbath? I'm with Jay. This is a weak card. It's very limited use. It looks cool at first glance because you get to do it to everything, but how many of the things that are in the everything actually are affected by shock? And it's only 2 shock, which is, in the grand scheme of things, okay. I flipped over a card that says fatigue. Everybody took 2 shock. Big deal. However, if you properly time this card and everybody knows you have it and everybody is aware of what's going on, and you're piling shock up on a bunch of people that can take shock that are not reality rated, and you drop this at the appropriate time, it could have a great effect. It could really help thin out, or at least make your opponents vulnerable to being thinned out heavily when properly played. But I think it's a very, very edge case kind of thing that the stars have to align for it to be that useful. Beyond that, it's just okay, these are the most. This is the most bad guys we've faced so far, and most of these guys take shock. Boom, let me play this so it's not sitting in my hand, and I can actually make use of it. But other than feeling good about the fact that I actually played the card, it really doesn't have a whole lot of value.
So yeah, I want to say in one of our streams, and I don't remember if it was you, Mark, or if it was maybe Robert who was game mastering, and we got into a bar or something like that, and we're confronted by a guy and surrounded by, I don't know, 12 to 16, it's supposed to be a show of force. And I threw this down and did 2 shock to everybody. And, it was just, I want to say this, and it was one of those stars aligned. I don't remember what the other things that happened were, but there were 2 or 3 things that stacked with this that they just then gave up and stepped back, and then we negotiated because, it was but it is, in that one, I would say the 2 shock, hey, if a fatigue pops up for the villains and you throw this down, then they all get 4 shock. Or some spells that do shock to a big area, or concussion grenades or something like that could stack. By itself, yes, it's not really going to do a lot unless you do other things, but it's something. At least there's no negative associated with
right.
it. So. There is a negative associated with it. I would completely change my mind. So let's move on to the first number 3, Feud, with an exclamation point.
Someone is out to get your hero. A nondescript bystander might recognize him for some past misdeed, or vengeful foe might stalk him from the shadows. The foe might attempt an ambush, frame him for some crime or offense, or simply tarnish his reputation. Gain 1 to 3 possibilities depending on the strength of the foe. Game Master's call. So, Jay, what are your thoughts on Feud?
Love this one. To me, this is like very Pan-Pacifica-y. Um, and I don't know if it necessarily even has to be like vengeance related. I kind of like even keeping this one. But I could see maybe it was also removed due to being kind of confusing regarding the possibility ward. And I run this maybe slightly different than you're supposed to. Because I really like the fact that it doesn't have to be combat.
Mm-hmm.
It could be blackmail. It could be like an ad smear campaign. Like there's all kinds of things. So I kind of go the opposite way with this. Is if a player plays this, I ask them, how many possibilities do you want? And
Ooh.
then the feud will be like how powerful it is dependent on what they said.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of put it on them, and with the knowledge it's going to be on them, not necessarily the rest of the group too. So
Right.
So yeah, I really like this one. I like there's a lot more role play potential in it than a lot of the other sort of just like attack cards. So yeah, I really like it.
Mark, your thoughts on Feud?
Jay, hat tip. That's a fantastic. I'm gonna steal that. That's just a great idea to go. How many possibilities how badly do you want to bone yourself? That's a great, because then it's on them, and game masters know if your players like to have a backstory, know what they have as their backstory. This is where it pays off. This is where you get to help let them have their backstory pay off, and if you have it somewhere, you can pluck from it and drop things in. If you keep track of people they've used as contacts in the past, you could pluck that in and drop it in. Or nemesis cards, those are fantastic for this. That would be a great point where they've played nemesis on these various bad guys periodically, and anybody that survived or didn't survive, because maybe this is the son of somebody that you whacked as a nemesis, and that works great. Let's hand that down as a hand-me-down. Those kinds of things can flavor this card a lot, and I'm with Jay. This card is a fantastic Pan-Pacifica flavor card, and it absolutely does not have to be in combat. I know that it says they prepare an ambush for them, but that ambush, that could be an ambush in a lot of ways. There's a lot of stuff you're doing in Pan-Pacifica where you need information, or you have information and you're trying to move it around and you're trying to do stuff with it, or you need you're looking for a broker who can do things for you, and all of a sudden that deal's gone sideways because someone has stepped in who is over that individual and said, you're not allowed to deal with these people anymore. I will take care of this. And you're like, well, wait, what's happening here? And hi, my name is Inigo Montoya-san. You killed my father. Prepare to die. Whatever. Or it could be combat. If you don't have a whole lot of stuff set aside, you could just drop somebody in there who has ambushed them and fought. And then it goes back. You can fall back on the how hard was it to defeat rule on how many possibilities they get. But this is you can make this really bad for the whole group too, because it's you're only given the possibilities to the one Storm Knight who played the card. But if it's an information broker thing and that happens to be your face, all of a sudden maybe this they go see the Yakuza, and someone their boyhood pal is now turned on them, and they're in the Yakuza, and oh look, you remember that time that you stole my ice cream? Guess what? And now I'll pay back with interest. Whatever. It's a great card. I love this card, and it's got lots and lots and lots of story potential. So if you're going into Pan-Pacifica, you might want to dig into your Storm Knight's backstories and figure out where this might come up, because I really hope it does. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I like also that it's not necessarily a combat. The players, especially this player, could, if Jay's doing it, say 3, and never actually encounter the person, because that person's
Right.
doing everything behind the scenes and they can't stop it. It's just they're getting hit left and right by all of these denial of services, or your subscription has been canceled, whatever. And cause a lot of problems without doing anything, which is very corporate, very Pan-Pacifica, and it's just very nice in the flavor, and very nice again with the potential and the possibilities that you can come up with, so that if this card even comes up multiple times, each occurrence of it could be vastly different. It's not just dino attack with different dinosaurs. It's completely new type of situation with the same card, which I think is pretty cool.
I will say in Pan-Pacifica, probably my favorite type of ambush to use on characters is a reporter with a live feed in the plexus, asking them pointed questions about what they're doing. And they know it's live, right? So they can't get it away with it. Just to see them squirm, it's great.
So one thing for players, we talk to GMs a lot. Players on this one, if you're a Pan-Pacifica player who plays this, or if you are a character with perks that come out of Pan-Pacifica that are subscription-based, and you play this, no grousing to the GM if they turn off your gene mod because suddenly someone revoked your, like Leamon was saying, they marked your subscription as delinquent, and all of a sudden something happens and and now you've got problems because your gene mod got shut down. So, if you play the card, be prepared for all kinds of stuff to happen, because Pan-Pacifica plays for keeps.
Okay, let's move on to the second number 3, which you'll just have to go back to the second number 1, Tech Supremacy, which we just discussed. So just rewind and go back over that. It is another Tech Supremacy card. So let's move on to the first and only number 4, Mutation. And again, even though kind of there's a vaccine and the the contagion has a cure, whatever, there still are those who previously got mutated into Jiangjis and yokai and all of those type of stuff. So they are still out there and they're still infected in areas.
Toast.
Okay, so some weird little plexus stuff was happening, and maybe somebody had a feud that caused the video to stop. Very strange.
That would be
Jay and Mark stopped seeing me, or I froze and they froze to me, so something was happening with our video conference software or something like that. So let's move on to Mutation. As I'd said before, there are areas within Pan-Pacifica that still are facing Jiangji and yokai and the various generations of Xenogospog, as well as out in like Taiwan and other rural areas and stuff that might still have infected. So that's the reason this card, number 4, did not go away, which is Mutation. Play when encountering infected creatures such as Jiangshi. One of them mutates into a more powerful monster. All Storm Knights gain 1 possibility. So Jay, what are your thoughts on Mutation?
This is a card that is very good. But I've seen it wreck players who did not know what they were getting into with it. Because even though a Jiangxi is it's basically like a 4th planting Gospog equivalent, right? People think it's like the first one. So when you go up to a yokai after that, it's like really rough. Beyond that, though, if this is a card that actually got more dangerous after the source book came out, because now if someone plays it on a yokai, they could go to a protean, which would be way worse. Though it is worth noting that what it actually says on the card is that it mutates into a more powerful monster. It doesn't technically have to mutate into a higher generation Xenogospog, it could turn into something completely different that the GM just wants to do or would fit the certain circumstances that are going on. So that is totally up to you. Um, and technically, like it could also work on infected,
Mm-hmm.
just regular infected humans as well. It doesn't have to turn them right into a Jiangxi. It could, do something totally different. One possibility for everybody, decent. Maybe not worth it if you made something into a yokai or protean, but otherwise, it's good. It's flavorful, but be careful. It can bite you in the butt if you're not careful.
Mark, your thoughts on mutation?
I like this card. This is a very Pan-Pacifica flavored card, and I think even if I think this card is relevant regardless of where the contagion is in your Cosm. Yeah, if it's been cured, this card is still valid because just think about like the contagion. Just because they've got a cure for it doesn't mean the contagion went away. It means that it's cured, and so when it pops up, they handle it, and it's like you feel bad, you get a shot, you don't feel bad, and you don't turn into bad things, and you don't want to eat your brother and sister. So it's managed now. Except when this card is played, maybe it's mutated into this other strain that the cure doesn't manage, and so I would be prepared if you wanted to go down that route. You could absolutely, that would absolutely sidetrack the mission they're on because let's say you play this, it's played, and you've decided this borough or this region, this small neighborhood that they're operating in suddenly has a contagion pop up that nobody can deal with, and you go back to old school with the infected running around and mutating into Jiangxi and becoming, and then you have to ferret out patient zero or it's going to keep spreading and be a problem. And if you can find patient zero or whatever and solve that problem, then Kanawa sends their containment unit down and it's solved, and you can go on about your merry, or some other corporation, and you can go on about your merry way. As Jay said, you don't necessarily have to mutate things into these super powerful, let me squash these alpha storm knights because they're really not ready for what this turns into kind of thing. What you could do is take the threats that you already have in the mission they're going on in the region and area that they're in and just drop something simple like a psionic power on them and just say, okay, they have this ability. These are the abilities they were written with or that I set them up for, or that the mission that I purchased says they have. And now I'm going to give them something like maybe you give them Mind Blast, and it's uncontrollable, and it just goes off every round. And so now you've got this psionic grenade going off in addition to whatever else they do. And so now they have fulfilled the card, becoming a more powerful monster, more powerful threat, right? And it's very, if you drop a psionic power on them that just broadcasts or goes off, or even that they can control because they mutated, okay, however you want to do it, but that's the psionics very Pan-Pacifica and giving them that kind of all of a sudden you've got infected running around that just, and everybody gets a headache when they get within 50 meters of them or whatever. That's a serious threat. Could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I like this, and like both you, Jay, and Mark had said, you can use this however you want. You could do a psionic power. You could give them another threat ability or two, a special ability. You could give them a gene mod saying that the person who was infected or changed into the Jiangxi or whatever had that gene mod. And in the writing, it's shown that gene mods were people with gene mods were experimented on, and it transferred into their infected form. So you could make this new mutated monster a slight adjustment, radically different. And again, I like the variability of the powers and what you can do with it. So cool card, mutation.
I was gonna wait and see if you mentioned it or not, but there is in like one of the like the appendices in Operation Soft Cell, some descriptions for some altered
Some
Xenogospog.
of us haven't played that
It
yet.
has it's not to do. It's not part of the actual adventure. It's just that's the only place they could fit it.
Yes.
I
wrote
believe
that.
Leamon wrote that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so it has nothing to do with the actual adventure, but it's just some example gene modded Xenogospog, right?
Right. Because I knew that
Yeah.
question would be asked, so I wanted to answer that
Yeah.
question. What happens if people have gene mods? So,
So there's some good examples there.
So look in it. There's stuff out there. Moving on to the first number 5 outbreak, which is play at any time. A rampaging horde of infected appear and are headed your way. All Storm Knights gain 1 to 3 possibilities after they deal with the creatures, depending on the size of the horde. So Jay, your thoughts on outbreak?
This is a card I'm glad they replaced because depending on where you are, like even in the base, like before the cure is found, just having an entire horde of infected show up is a bit much to just happen all of a sudden. Now, if you're playing a scenario specifically where you want there to be like a big zombie horde, then yeah, do it. Maybe include this. But if you're in like Tokyo or something, or any of the places where it's relatively taken care of, it just never really fit. Plus the fact that infected aren't very hard. So even having a ton of them, making more of them doesn't even really make them that much harder. So I really don't foresee ever getting 2 or 3 possibilities from this unless things go really south. And unlike, I mean, a lot of the a random encounter of monsters suffer from this, but this one especially just feels like it's just going to make the session take longer for no real reason because it's just zombies. There's no like backstory behind it or a cool villain or anything. It's just unless you want to completely like take everything off and oh hey there was a lab here and now we're going to explore it. But yeah, out of all of the you fight dudes, I think this is the one that I actively remove from the deck the most because I just don't want to deal with it.
Mark, your thoughts on outbreak?
I disagree with Jay. I like this. I think it's a flavorful card for Pan-Pacifica when the outbreak, when the contagion was a thing. I think it makes sense because it keeps the contagion as a legitimate and real threat in day-to-day life in Pan-Pacifica. And it's not, to me, it's not that hard of a thing to pop up in that if you've got actual problems with this kind of a contagion, it's gonna happen like this, where somebody who's infected gets in a small tight group that's sealed off away from people, and say like in the basement floor of some building or other, and suddenly 6 or 8 people are turned, because that's how the movie goes, right, where you can't get away from, and something happens, earthquake, car accident, doors get blown open, whatever, you have a mishap with your grenade launcher, or you throw your grenade and you blow a corner of a building open, and here comes these zombies out that were previously contained, nobody knew where they were there, and now you've got this horde coming out. I can figure out a way to put it into the game, and in an environment where the infected are still a threat and running around, this card makes a lot of sense. And I may be in the minority, but I miss that aspect of Pan-Pacifica, because to me that was one of the things that made Pan-Pacifica. There were some other things, but the contagion being an ongoing thing and a problem when you rolled into that Cosm was, that's something you had to always think about. This card brings that back to the fore when, whatever else we were dealing with right now boom, we have to get this outbreak dealt with. And GMs, just because the card hits the table does not mean at that moment you must activate your zombie horde. You can just kind of slide it up to the side and just keep it in view and look at what you got coming and see where it makes sense to have that zombie horde pop up. And have it pop up then. There could be a much more dramatically cool moment for that to happen, or something that story-wise makes a lot more sense. Or you could decide to wait for that mishap in combat that does, in fact, you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to blow a couple of doors open, and they come piling out in the middle of something else you're going on. Because as Jay pointed out, the infected are not, they're mooks, but they're horde of mooks, and they're not that hard to deal with. They're just a lot of them. They could be that hard to deal with, though, if you're already dealing with something else. Or, you got a complication coming up in a DSR, or you're on a chase, and now all of a sudden you got this to deal with. One of the ways, though, I think you can get into Jay's 2 and 3 possibility situations with these guys, though, is, when the infected pop up, how is it that they got contained? Well, Konoha created containment units. So when they get a report that there's infected, these containment units scream into action, and out pop all the Konoha guys in their zombie apocalypse armor, and they go deal with it. So, after 3 rounds of these guys being there, here's the Konoha unit. So it doesn't have to, I know the card says infected. Elaborate a little bit. We'll give it a little dramatic license there, and bring in the Konoha containment unit behind it, and don't tell them that they're coming. They're like, oh, we dealt with the infected. Well, somebody called 911, and here's Konoha. Now you got to deal with them too, and that could get you into 2 and 3 possibility territory when you deal with guys in battle armor, and or maybe a possibility rated dude that's leading them.
Yeah, I'll say that I've had areas where Pan-Pacifica or Marketplace, we'll say Reality of Marketplace, landed elsewhere on Core Earth that they didn't need or did not want a show of infection. So then I just removed this card from the deck because they just weren't there. They were doing like a original classic Torg, was it the Miracle of Sacramento, I believe, and they wanted to pretend that they had helped Core Earth take it over when they actually took it over. And they don't want, hey, why is the same thing happening here that's happening over there? So they just didn't introduce any infected on it. It is one of the, out of all the dino attacks, it's kind of lower until we're not going to get to them, but we will in future episodes. So listen to our future episodes. There are other type of infected cards that could play well off of this, where you have, like we've talked about before, where a couple of these cards might interact a little bit better. But as its replacement is still a sort of dino attack type card. If we're calling these the generic, add a bunch of things to fight. And that is the new number 5, Assassin's Attack. Minions of the villain attack sometime this act. All Store Knights gain 1 to 3 possibilities once they are defeated, depending on their strength. So, Jay, Assassin's Attack.
This is probably the most average of these Dino Attack style cards. I do like that it's minions of the villain, so it's something germane to what's actually going on.
It's the Foot Clan.
Yeah, like whoever, whatever you're going up against, right?
Corporate ninjas.
It's not just totally random. Like in the Nile Empire, it could have nothing to do with you whatsoever, right? Same in Tharkold, right? But here it is actually related to what you're doing somehow. So there will no doubt be a clue. And if there's enough of them, there will probably be a traitor among them that you might be able to question. So I like this one better than the Outbreak, but it's still like basically the average of one of these.
Mark, any additional thoughts on Assassin's Attack?
Yeah, this one fits the current version of Pan-Pacifica better than Outbreak does, I will readily admit. It's still very Pan-Pacifica. Corporate Ninja come to mind as the perfect one for this, because everybody uses Corporate Ninja. But as Jay pointed out, it's villain, minions of the villain. So know who your villain is, and know what minions they use. Now, these minions that are going to attack because of this card are not don't decrement the minions that are already written into the mission. These are
Mhm.
not, they've got 10 over here or whatever. And so those 10 now are down by 5 because I put 5 of them over here. Now they're only going to be 5 over there. No, 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 no. These are extra in addition to minions of the villain. So just because you're getting 1 to 3 possibilities, don't remove them. Just say, oh, he had some more over here. And yeah, 1 to 3 possibilities. I don't know why it's like middle of the road, or you're saying it's the average one of the rest of them when it's still 1 to 3 possibilities. So you can give them, I mean, you can jack it up and be hard.
I mean, not from possibility wise, just like my overall like rating on.
Fair. Okay.
It's just the average wandering monster.
It is. No, it's Dino Attack Pan-Pacific
Yeah.
style. How do your dinos attack? My dinos attack
From
is
the
corporate
air.
assassins. Yeah. These are ninja with puff of smoke, and here they come. So yeah, it's Dino Attack. Otherwise,
Yeah, I would say adding with being the minions of the villain, you could go, yeah, and you can switch it up, because one of the things with these cards is I like the ones that allow more choices, so it's not just the same thing. It's not just the T-Rex each time. This time it's the T-Rex, next time it's the Velociraptors, and this doesn't even have to be something different, but it could be as Mark said. You could have it where the party gets attacked by these people, and the party knows that the minions of the villain, they've met them before, and these guys represent them. It could also work the other way, where the party doesn't know who the villain is yet. They're trying to figure it out, and all of a sudden they get attacked by these guys, and that's how they link the mission to the villain, if they've been having trouble that way, or they just need some clues shoved right in their noses. They're all wearing, like I said, the Foot Clan, motif. They have the hoods with the foot thing, and they're like, okay, it is Shredder who we are fighting. He is the villain of this. We thought it was somebody else. We thought it was Krang or whatever. So yeah, I like when they're a little bit different. We talked about that with the feud, so I wouldn't just have it always be the exact same thing. I would try to switch it up. So, having said that, we've gone through the first 5 cards. Next session or episode, we will get through the next ones. We do appreciate you either listening to us on your podcast or watching us on YouTube. And until next time, go ahead, do write us at torgdcd@gmail.com. And again, until next time, we hope you have fun in your own Cosmverse. Bye.